I just keep waiting and wondering when exactly will Putin's ongoing loss of spheres of influence in the grand arena of global geopolitics, right, finally turn into an inevitable loss of influence over the vast territories of the post-Soviet space? Will it eventually get to the point where even specific regions within Russia itself realize that Putin has become so incredibly weak that they can start making some unexpected and highly eccentric moves? These things are definitely interconnected, right? They sense that he is getting weaker. But will it really come to that? That's a good question. And what can be done to make it happen?
This has actually been going on for a long time already. I mean, well, the most obvious example is Azerbaijan, right? Basically, over the past year, Azerbaijan has been blatantly disrespecting Putin, telling him that he is a nobody and that his opinion doesn't matter at all. And Putin can't do anything, absolutely nothing about it. And Azerbaijan has taken some very unfriendly actions. For example, they've arrested Russians there, and some of them were quite high-ranking. They shut down Russian offices on their territory, and basically, you could say, have been economically spitting in Putin's face. A very similar situation is already happening with Tajikistan, which sometimes does not even make the effort to attend high-level diplomatic meetings with Putin, and we are seeing this occur more and more frequently as time goes on. So in actual reality, this is all happening. This is significantly more apparent in Central Asia than in any other region, because there are other competing sources of geopolitical power there. That is, Turkey and China are present there, and they have long since pushed out Putin's Russian Federation, if not completely, then to a very significant extent. So what remains there are some ritual gestures, like when Tokayev still makes some concessions toward Putin, but he knows that he doesn't have to bend as much as before, because behind him stand Xi Jinping and Erdogan. And, well, also within the Russian Federation, because that's why Putin is forced to play along with the Muslim republics. And by the way, this really irritates Russian fascists.
And by the way, he forgives everything to Azerbaijan these days, because there too, Turkey is one of the signatories, well, unofficially, of security guarantees. And he puts up with all this behavior from Aliyev, but he takes it out on Armenia. Yes, unleashing his Solovyavs and Skabeyevas, who threaten war, conquest, and the return of some so-called original historical lands. And do you think, does Putin need a small victorious war right now? Is Armenia really at risk? Is it in the danger zone today? Because after all, why would he mess with NATO, right? It's still unclear how things will turn out. Maybe they haven't been intimidated enough yet. In Armenia, well, what's the point of capturing it? Again, they'll come out and say, what? It'll take 3 days.
Oh, that's one way to look at it, yes. On the one hand, yes. Of course, it would be significantly more convenient and practical for him to do this with Moldova, but it's extremely challenging to actually reach Moldova because there's no direct border, and getting to Moldova through Ukraine is an incredibly daunting and difficult task, and even more so through the rest of Europe. So you can cause some trouble there, like during elections. You can disrupt them, you can put forward some pro-Russian candidates. But even from a military standpoint, not even Transnistria, those retirees sitting on Soviet-era munitions, they really can't do anything to Moldova. For Vladimir Putin, that would certainly be the most straightforward course of action. But geography has arranged it so that Moldova is effectively shielded by its unique geographical positioning. That's why, if you take a closer look at the entire post-Soviet space, it turns out that Armenia is actually the easiest target of all, primarily because it's so easy to reach. And on top of that, it remains significantly vulnerable and weak, both militarily and geopolitically. Azerbaijan is a formidable opponent that is difficult to challenge, especially since behind them stands the power of Turkey, the strength of the Turkish army, and their substantial financial backing. Azerbaijan is a wealthy country, rich in oil and gas. Now, as for Central Asia, it turns out that Kazakhstan protects everyone there. And Kazakhstan, while not particularly strong, is vast in terms of territory. So, in other words, it's not that easy to... I mean, maybe it would actually be easy to conquer because their army is rather weak after all. But it's difficult to hold such a vast territory because out of all the Soviet republics, Kazakhstan is the second largest by area. It's even bigger than Ukraine, I think, in terms of territory. Well, I haven't compared them in a while, but in general, they're comparable. And the border with the Russian Federation is 7,000 kilometers long, but there's also China there. And as for all the other neighboring countries in the region, they could be seen as relatively weak and easily conquered. Sorry for the awkward phrasing in Russian. But again, they are effectively protected by their unique geography. Because, well, landing an invasion force across the Caspian Sea is potentially possible, but it is extremely difficult. You simply can't move large organized army units across that water. And to get there by land, you absolutely have to go through the vast territory of Kazakhstan. So if we're talking about Kyrgyzstan, I don't know, Uzbekistan, and so on, right? That is why Armenia is the easiest region to secure, situated directly adjacent to Georgia.
But does Vladimir Putin already truly need this war, or can he still wait a bit longer until the discontent among all these Z supporters and those obsessed with the war reaches its limit, so he can finally throw them this bone?
He's working on it, but in my opinion, they've decided not to intervene directly. So, roughly speaking, the waters are being muddied there by the Orthodox Church, this Armenian one, whose members the Armenians themselves are putting in prison, since they understand that they're all Russian agents. There's also a military base there, which is formally still listed. So there are people there who can stir things up, who can muddy the waters. There are some old pro-Russian opposition political forces, but they're not very active, because attitudes toward the Russian Federation have changed a lot in Armenia. People there believe that Putin betrayed them during the war with Azerbaijan. That is precisely how the situation unfolded, because those Russian peacekeepers actually ultimately ended up betraying even more Armenians and failed to provide protection for anyone or effectively separate the sides. So that's why Armenia, in reality, may not be a very strong or very combative country, but it is a proud country. In other words, it won't give in. So again, you might be able to send in some kind of contingent, but then it will just become a headache for you. And if Putin needs to initiate some kind of new, small-scale military conflict, then most likely he would be more likely to bet on the Baltic countries, because in that case, let's say the geopolitical status and stakes of such a conflict are higher, since it involves NATO. He understands that right now NATO is in complete disarray, because Trump is practically abandoning the organization and making it clear to Putin that he can seize whatever he wants. No one is going to fight for Estonia. Well, obviously not for all of Estonia. Well, Narva would be enough, and a small piece, some little part of eastern Estonia, especially with the Russian fifth column that's present there, plus the European Union. So most likely, if Putin does make a move, it would be somewhere here rather than in Armenia.